Welcome to One-Weighted Machines and the B7 Audi RS4 series.
We've discussed noises in the putback series. I did talk about the seeming high pressure fuel pump sound. Whenever I would open the door since the putback series, sometimes on the first time I would open the door after say 3 or 4 days that I hadn't touched the car, it sounds like this high pressure fuel pump when you open the door the first time. Some kind of odd sound comes from where I'm moving the camera, this area with the fueling system. So again, I don't know how much the HPFPs are affected with the door opening, low pressure fuel pump priming process. But I haven't opened the door in the car in about 3 or 4 days. So I'm going to set the tripod as close as I can. And I'll open the door and we'll see if it makes a noise so you guys can see what it is. Now, here's the interesting part. I'll actually do this. I'll open it a few times, okay? Because the second time, the sound is almost completely gone. Third, fourth, and fifth times. Sometimes the car continues priming if you keep opening and closing the driver's door. But most of the time, it just stops after a while because it's already done its business. So I'll open and close it for as long as the car's brain decides to keep priming. And we'll see how long it makes the noise today. Do note that while it makes this sound, startups have been perfectly fine. Okay, this is really important. Since the beginning of the putback series, well, not since the beginning of the putback series, okay? Once we did the first start and it did that sound, which I'm pretty sure was just the tensioners requiring oil pressure, that sound never came back again. And I've started and driven the car a number of times since then. So this high pressure fuel pump thing, you know what, just follow the series and the sounds, because again, I'm just as following it as you guys are, so just keep watching the videos. But the point here is this: regardless of what sounds a high pressure fuel pump has made since everything was put back together and the car sat for so long, it has functioned perfectly fine every single time. And after this first door open, you could go out, drive the car a million times, open the door 15 times during that day, or turn on the car 15 times and everything will sound just fine. I'm going to do the door opening thing once, and then because I really want to show, well, we'll see how it's doing today, I'm not going to continue opening the door. I'm going to sit in the car and I'm going to start cycling the key because that will prime the fuel pump, the low pressure one, and whatever sound makes it up here at least. So that's what I'm going to do. One door open and then the key turns. So as you saw there, it didn't even do it once. Unfortunately, you guys never got to hear the sound that I'm talking about, but I don't hope it makes it again. I'm happy that it's completely gone. But I mean, yeah, if you do hear something weird after a long period of sitting from one of your high pressure pumps in these areas here, maybe don't think too much of it, because for me it cleared up after about, I don't know, what's it been, a week and a half? So yeah, it didn't even do it this one time. All right. Another thing we got to talk about is the starter situation with this car. So, I mean, that sticky starter solenoid, which I'm 90% sure is my problem here, and a lot of you will have this problem, it's very intermittent. Okay. The day we turned it on after 8-9 months, it started up on the first turn of the key. The other day I came to get it out of the garage. It took about 10 attempts. Relays would sometimes click, wouldn't sometimes click, but the relays aren't too loud on this car anyways. But this starter stuff has been debated since the beginning of time for these cars. But it's almost always a new starter that fixes it. So the starter is very tricky. I'm going to, I don't know what I'm going to do next with this. There's still things we're behind on. But I'm just going to tell you, it was a few days ago. It took 10 attempts and I was like, yo, screw it. It's not going to start. Then I went inside for 5 minutes, came back, and it fired right up. So something must have loosened up the solenoid. Yeah, so I don't know if there's... Okay, here's what I'll say. With the starter situation, again, because we try to test as much as we can with this car, I am actually probably going to put the repair off until later, because as odd as it has behaved in hot weather, cold weather, everything, it's never failed me, okay? I have never had to get this car towed before. And I've gone pretty far with it some places, and it started up even with its weird starting things. So again, I mean, because we're just testing stuff out with this car, I want to see if that sticky starter solenoid, if a day comes when it completely craps out. You know what I mean? Like, even if after 30 minutes, an hour of it, not attempts, but giving it gaps and whatnot, will it completely die? So we might not change the starter for a long time. I'm kind of not a fan of what I'm saying right now, but I'll do it for the sake of the channel for a while. The only thing I do is I try to let it idle when I go somewhere and I don't have to turn it off if I have the option of not turning it off, but it still hasn't failed completely ever on me. So that's enough on the starter. When I do it, I'm probably going to get a Vallejo unit because that's what seems to work for everybody. There's a number of aftermarket brands. I'm sure going to the dealer would cost... Let's not even talk about that. But the Vallejo unit, I also think I read somewhere that people said they've seen the stock Audi one is actually a Vallejo unit with the sticker or the mark peeled off. So we all know OEM is hit or miss sometimes. Sometimes it's the same, sometimes it's not. In this case, we'll probably get a Vallejo unit aftermarket and change it. So either a video will come up soon for that, but I kind of want to continue this test just to see what the exact behavior of these stock starter solenoids is and how long one of you can get away with it if you don't have time to do such a job, because it's a tricky one, okay? Why do we have the oil jugs here? So as you guys remember, we did the oil cooler, secondary oil cooler O-rings that go into the block. Now, yeah, it did leak oil out of that oil cooler and from the block side, and the car was sitting for a long time and it kept leaking from all of its ports that were open. But usually, I'm pretty sure I've seen that people get away on an oil change, a normal oil change, with just 2 jugs of this stuff, okay? So I've been checking my dipstick. I've never gotten a low oil light yet, or low coolant, okay? Both have been fine. In the garage, I washed it the other day and it's bone dry under there, okay? It's not leaking anything. Even though the low oil light never came on, I have been checking with the dipstick, as us normal people do, and I was near the minimum mark again, okay? So the engine had continued to take in more oil, and the other day I kept filling a little bit from the one that had just a bit left in it. I ended up completely emptying it. See, you guys can tell, these are 2 completely empty bottles that we have here. So again, I don't think, and I do not have the oversized aftermarket oil coolers. I have a set wrap unit that hopefully was replaced by one of the previous owners, but only time will tell in that case. But even with the stock oil cooler, here's what I'm going to say. I mean, just by deduction, I mean, sure, I did a lot of stuff on this car, small things here and there, but in terms of the oil system, if you're doing the oil cooler O-rings, and you've done a full drain of the oil, you will need more than 2 jugs. So I don't know if Liqui Moly sells little 1 or 2 liters, but that should be more than enough to get you up on the dipstick to where you need to be. Or just get another whole 2 more of these jugs and just have them ready, 3 more jugs, whatever. But you should have more oil than this. And these 2 combined are, in Canada land speaking, 10 liters. Okay, so 10 liters of oil was not enough to get you up on the dipstick. And I'm going to say already versus the, what did I have in here before? I had Motul oil in this, okay? So how long did I have that? That oil change was done at about 167,000 kilometers, I think. Yeah, 167. So for about 5K, which again, I'm lowering my oil change intervals after all the videos you guys have seen and things we've seen. But if you guys remember from the earlier videos, sometimes when I'd cold start this thing, it'd give puffs of smoke out the back. And the injectors are fine, fueling system's fine. So sometimes I think it's just puffs of oil. Again, it's just a pure guess, okay? But the shocking thing was that after 8 months of sitting with this liquid moly, there was not a hint of any kind of smoke. Put back part 6, okay? I recorded a video there. I tried to make those videos short, but they still came out long. That video is literally, my phone was set up right there. And the same time that this camera was at the front when I did that first start. This is why when you see the videos on YouTube of people just starting the car with the exhaust sound and they're not showing what's at the front, you have to be a bit wary of those videos, because in that video you can hear that tick sound very lightly, way less than what you heard at the front and for way less duration in the part 6 video. So go see that for a few seconds just when I started up if you haven't seen it. And you'll see not a puff of anything. And later on in that video, there's a bunch of condensation that builds up on the bumper, and that's just normal. But that's what I wanted to say, was in that video, you can see that with the liquid moly at the exhaust, no puff at all. With the Motul brand, I would get puffs of smoke randomly. I also remember when I was doing hard pulls sometimes, I'd look behind me in the rear view, and man, I'd get some big plumes of smoke. Again, I don't know if that was fuel, overfueling, oil, whatever, but sometimes I get plumes of smoke. I still haven't done enough driving with this time. I'm trying to bleed the clutch too before we start going crazy with this car again. And yeah, so I just wanted to tell you that is what's going on. I think liquid moly is really, really crucial for these cars, even in 540. So we'll continue to see how well this does. Eventually we're going to try 5W50. But I really think with proper warm-up, this is more than anything that you could do on the street legally, and whatever else type of driving you do and be fine. So now let's get to scanning the car. So important things to mention right now is I have not hard resetted this car whatsoever for the past 8 or 9 months. So whatever codes it's had stored is what we're going to see. Whatever's come up new, we're going to see. If you guys will remember, the traction control life in one of the putbacks parts just went off on its own. And sometimes we got over 7,000 RPM. Sometimes it did at 6,800 to 7,000 hard limiter. Just so that we keep everything together, I'm going to right now do a scan with whatever's in the car, and we'll read it and we'll keep going from there. Then I'm going to upload this video, obviously, with all these clips here, and I'm going to hard reset it tonight. We'll leave it for about 24, 48 hours. We'll come back and see what's going on. Maybe the car will need some drive cycles after that, but let's just see what we're dealing with now. And a very important note of mention on this one is, you guys saw me get excited about the vacuum line down here that I forgot to take off in the carbon clean intake manifold second time around, and it was just there, and I thought, okay, maybe we got a vacuum leak there. We're gonna have to smoke test this. I'll get a smoke tester at some point, but yeah, a little bit of parts throwing when you don't have tools is how you have to go sometimes. For you guys, it costs nothing. You just get to watch and see what happens and use mine as a possible template of things that could happen to you. But enough of getting on about that. So the flap sensor could be bad. And if I decide to just do the flap sensor without smoke testing it, you guys also do remember, those of you that have followed for long enough, that there was some kind of a cracked hose under the intake manifold that could be related to this, but I smoke tested it with a cigarette back in the day, and I don't know how effective that really was and how much worse that's really gotten in time. So I actually might do a mini service position to do that, because remember I told you guys in service position you can change this one. It honestly might be easier than taking the intake manifold off with all the steps that are required, because it's, you know what I mean. I think it's easier, but I'll decide that once we do more. Okay, let's get inside and do the codes. I just wanted to tell you that vacuum line for the codes that are stored did not fix anything. We still have a limiter that sometimes cuts in at 68 to 7,000 and sometimes lets us rev to 7,200, which means it's trying to be free. A free bird. Maybe not. Okay, let's go inside there and see what's stored in this car. I gotta close the door so this thing shuts up. Why is this still making that sound? Shut up! Oh, it's because it's in reverse and the parking sensors are tripping out. Okay, sorry about that. Alright, okay, let's choose the RS4. Enter. Enter. Alright, so we got 5 codes here. Let's see what they are. Intake manifold runner control stuck open bank 1. Okay, let me turn the light on here. Just give me a second, maybe that'll help. Okay, so we got that there. Okay, O2 sensors, you guys all know for this car it's not applicable. Well, we got the same code. So, there's one way to look at this. It's probably the flap sensor. And I don't care how many millions of years I might be alive for, I'm always going to mix up bank 1 and 2 when I'm doing something else. So, it's most likely the flap sensor for bank 1, which we need to change. We'll talk about that in a future video. My brain is done. Now that I got that wire out of the way, here's the other thing, alright? So, hopefully the flap sensor solves our problem, finally. It's very surprising that that vacuum line was disconnected and didn't affect anything. But, I mean, maybe it did to a degree. We'll only find out as we keep going forward, okay? If that vacuum line had any bearing on this. But, okay. Operation, get rid of dash lights. I really don't care about dash lights. Some things like the brake pad sensors are probably going to be there regardless of what we do because of the brake pads that have been put on this car and shops that have tucked it behind the fender line or whatever because they don't have the sensor. But in terms of these kind of lights here, why is my glove torn like that? Okay, in terms of these kind of lights here, check engine light, we will most likely get rid of that with a tune. Okay, there are tunes out there now that will get rid of that. The exhaust modifications I have which cause that. Other than that, this car is completely healthy. EPC and check engine light are a combination of that flap sensor. Very highly likely. The airbag light, I mean, it's pretty ancient, those codes videos, but they're still very relevant. So if you haven't seen them and you've just picked up on the channel, go watch the codes videos from way back when. And what was I saying? Yes, the airbag light. When I first got this car a number of years ago, I took it to an Audi specialist who had high-tech scanners for Audis, and that was something to do with the seat buckle. Okay, so I'm pretty sure he told me that I need a new seat buckle, is what the scanner said. So we're probably going to do this to get rid of the airbag light. Now, the other thing about the airbag light, which is why I say I don't care too much about these things, is I most likely need to have my rear seats plugged back in because they have a bunch of SRS connections too for the most likely, as I've said in my seat removal video, for the tensioner for the center passenger. Okay? So I might put the rear seats back in. I might videotape it just so some of you taking the seats out for reinstall have an easier time, and maybe there's some tips and tricks that arise with it, as things in reinstall always do with this car. So yeah, I think that's a whole bunch of stuff for now as where we are with this car, and we'll just keep it going. All right, inserting this clip afterwards. I mean, I remember people in Australia saying that it's reversed for them. Okay, maybe in the UK it is too, but for us, bank 1, passenger side, North America, bank 2, driver's side, North America. So we are still dealing with this sensor, and I shall decide if I put it back into service position quickly to swap that out, or if we put it in intake manifold off mode. But the reason I don't really want to do intake manifold off mode is because we also, like I said, a bit of parts throwing, a bit of tool using, because I say I don't have a smoke tester. Okay, I mean, look, that vacuum line that was here. I thought that was going to fix everything because that's related to the flaps, and it didn't. So a smoke tester would have billowed smoke from there, but it would not have solved our problem. Okay, so smoke tester isn't always going to give us the answers anyways, if that would have happened. So in a way, the whole deduction thing, if we change this flap out and it fixes our problem, it means that hose underneath the manifold still has no effect on anything. I haven't been under there for a while to remember where that's routed to, but that hose under there, if this doesn't work, that's the next thing we're going after, and at that point we're going to remove the manifold again. So a mini service position stint might come up at some point soon, but 7,000 RPM isn't so bad for me right now. I mean, not for anybody. Do you really need to use the full 8K all the time? Of course you do. Of course you do. 8250, whatever your tune allows you. Okay, I'm not gonna keep going on about that. I do want my full red line back. I do need to try bleeding the clutch to see if that, I mean, this time, okay, that I have been driving the car, the pedal hasn't stuck, done the sticking thing one time, which I'm happy about, obviously. But the harder you drive these things and the hotter the day, whatever, the higher the chance if you got a bit of stick, it's going to happen. So this sticky clutch pedals could be a costly, and if it comes down to the clutch thing, okay, sorry, if I do a fluid bleed and it doesn't work, we're pulling everything out, okay, to do the clutch, and then we'll do cam girdle seals, we'll do a million things. But the car smells less of oil, so I do really think that all of that oil smell that previous shops have told me it's your valve cover gaskets, and shops, here's the thing, okay, I'm not going to talk smack, but 2 shops told me I needed valve cover gaskets. The valve cover gaskets on this thing are very healthy, okay? I think they've been changed at some point even, but that's the quick thing that they can do, okay? They can get this into their shop and tell one of their techs, swap out the valve cover gaskets, we'll charge him a whole bunch of money, easy job, he goes away, becomes our customer. Meanwhile, the problem could be some little seal that's way, way down under there, okay? So I'm not gonna keep going into that, but valve cover gaskets are fine on this car. All the smell was from the oil cooler O-rings at the bottom, just on the block, just a ton of, because the oil builds up with the dirt, especially on a car like mine with no underbody cover on it, right? You need those underbody covers, but see, you just keep remembering small things that these cars need all the time. The point is, you guys got the point. I mean, this video is going to be a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but there's good information in it in terms of those of you that actually follow this car. So in the next parts, whatever I do, I am going to do the hard reset, okay? But we're going to go ahead with this, most likely, because a hard reset is probably going to give me no codes. But we'll see. I'll put that in the next video, and because I'd have to drive the car for a while, okay? And right now, with the way the roads are, I really don't want to be taking this thing out too much. So, yeah, we'll do that. You guys got good information in this video. I got some new information on what's going on in the computer. Thankfully, there's no new codes after all this time, so pretty good electronic system so far for these Audis in my book. But also, I will keep rambling because it's not rambling, it's helpful stuff to those of you who actually are thinking or do own these. From the time that I've had this car and I've been following stuff, these cars have sensitive seals. They have sensitive, I don't know, to a degree electronics, but I've seen a handful of cases where storing these things outside in the Northeast, North America, I don't care, even if you're somewhere else cold, I don't know, Russia or something with one of these, you do not store one of these outside because there's a high chance they're going to act up. I'm not going to experiment with this car, okay? I am doing an experiment with the Volvo. For those of you, even if you're Audi people, do watch the next Volvo video I put up because you'll see that I'm doing some shifty stuff with the electronics on that car, but it's all good. it'll all work out most likely. But yeah, don't store these things outside, people, if you live in cold climates. Keep them inside, keep them nice and warm, and warm them up. They should be healthy for a long time, as we shall see with this one. So with some Audi door chime in the back, that's it for this video. We got a whole bunch of stuff to do, but everything is all in well with the RS4. Very minor things. I do plan on bleeding the clutch soon too, so if I didn't mention that, there's another mention for that. We'll see when we get to all these things. I got a lot of other things to do. Thanks for continuing to watch, and keep subscribing and liking to get more RS4 content. Thanks.